Thank you for joining us today for a RunSignup 201 and taking your website V2 to the next level. Just a couple of really quick housekeeping notes off the top. If you need closed captions for this, you can enable that on your GoToWebinar module. We are recording this. We will send out the slides by email sometime tomorrow, as well as posting them to our website. You can always find webinars that you've missed or that you want to revisit by going to Knowledge Base and then Webinars and Events. And there's a little button there that says On Demand Webinars. That'll take you to ones that have already happened. If you have any questions during this, Jen is on today and she'll be answering some questions during the webinar. We may have some questions at the end of the webinar. And then I'll say off the top, I know between last week's website webinar and this one, there's a lot of questions about websites. I think we're seeing more and more customers starting to move their website over. And because of that, there's just a lot of questions that we need to answer. So we will be putting together an FAQ from those questions and other common questions about websites V2. I think that'll probably be next week before that's up, so it may not be in your email tomorrow, but you can also look for that if there's more questions you have that you feel like haven't been answered completely. Agenda for today, we're going to go over some of our recommendations for using images on your website, a little bit of a deep dive into the cards component because it's really cool but has a few kind of complicating factors. We're going to take a look at the new FAQ component, some new style options that kind of change how you can make your website look, and then some of our newest components. Kind of the goal today is, introducing some new stuff and also talking a little bit more about some of the things that we tend to kind of gloss over because it doesn't impact most people, things like really specific image recommendations. And sometimes we will skip through because most people aren't there and they aren't using them, and they're a little bit more complicated to explain, and so we don't want to confuse people unnecessarily. But if you're on the 201 webinar, we assume that you may be looking to kind of upgrade your website a little bit more, and you do want the details about kind of every component that we have. This is just kind of off the top question that we get a lot. You cannot currently copy erase website. So you can't, say, I really like my website for my marathon. I want to just copy the full website to a half marathon. The workaround for that for some events is that you can copy a whole race. And if you copy a whole race, that will also copy the website. So if you have new races that you're starting and you want to kind of use one race as a template for that, the races you haven't already set up on RunSignup, then you can create one that has the basics of what you want it to look like, and then copy that for each of the new races. You can use that as a bit of a hack for a template right now. However, I would not recommend, deleting a current race or starting a new one for a race that exists just to make making your website easier. You're going to lose all of that kind of year-over-year data that's in your race if you renew it instead of restarting it. So I would avoid doing that. If you really don't have the time and ability to get your website up and updated to V2, then I would hold off and wait a little bit longer until templates are available that will make the setup a little bit easier. It's kind of a decision you have to weigh for yourself depending on how many races you have and how much content you have to move over. Image recommendations. So off the top, just kind of our main size recommendations for each image. This will be shared, like I said, the slides will be shared by email, so you can refer back to these, and then I'll show you another resource for them. But I think there's kind of two key points to this. One is the full size of the image. That's how big you actually want the image to be. This kind of main text area is going to be a little bit smaller, and that's text or an area of the image that won't get cut off on different types of screens. And so if your image can look a little different on a mobile device and on a desktop, and so you want to make sure that if there's anything crucial, typically that means there is text in your image, that it's all contained within that smaller portion of the banner image. Quick cheat for this, and I think this is underutilized, we do have Canva templates for each of these image sizes, and that's going to make it easy, if nothing else, for you to make sure you have the right size. There's also more flexibility there for you to actually build your images. So for example, if I'm coming in and I know I want a full height banner image template, I can just open that here in Canva. This is probably going to recognize that I'm logged in, so it'll give me an edit there. It won't give you that, but you'll still have the ability to use the template. I open it in editor, and this is going to pop up some template versions of that banner. So it's already going to be set to the right size. You can, just drop in your own image here, or you can use one of these here and put an image in the background and kind of update using some of the styles here. There's all sorts of different options for each of these. So I think that's a good starting point for you if you need a little bit of assistance or just don't want to have to remember every time what the right sizing is. Images and alt text. This is one that I think is sort of important to know for the readability of your website. If you're using images, the alt text that comes up here when you're uploading your image, there's kind of two purposes. One is that it is read by Google, and the second is that it is read by screen readers. So if you have someone who is coming to your race website who needs assistance with seeing a website, oftentimes they'll use a screen reader, which is going to read the words on the page to them. If there's no words for your image, it's just not going to read anything at all. If you put something into that alt text, that's what it's going to read to the person on your website. So there's kind of two ways to look at that. You want to make sure that information is shared, but you don't want to clog things up and have 3 sentences read to someone about the picture of the backdrop at your race. Because it's not crucial information for them. It just makes it harder for them to get through your website. So if your image includes information, if it has text, if it has a race date, if it has something that is important about your race, you want to add the alt text there so the image can be understood. If your image is strictly decorative, it's just a background image, you do not need to add alt text. It actually will kind of make things harder if you do. One kind of wonky note on the image gallery right now, and I think at some point this might get updated, but currently you cannot add alt text after the initial upload. So you want to make sure that you add it when you're first uploading that image. You can't actually go back and edit it. So if you needed to change it or add it later, you would need to just re-upload that image and put it in at that time. Header options. So these are going to be the big page banners that exist on your homepage, kind of the first introduction to your race. And there's a couple of different options. We just kind of wanted to go through the different style options for them. These here are options that exist for all 3 of the header options you have, the default, stacked, and full height. As noted, there is an alt text field. I kind of cut it off here, but up here, if you have some races will use an image with their race name and date instead of text with their race name and date. If you do that, then you want to make sure you include that up here. Otherwise, some people may not know what your date is. The other note here is you have the ability to use the default name, date, default name, date, and location that are going to pull directly from your race information. If you want to change the way that looks, you want to specify something like the weekend of, etc., you can do that with a custom banner name. You can also hide each of these. My only word of warning for that is that if you change any of this information or you hide any of it, you want to make sure it exists somewhere else on your website that is prominent. It's easy to be, looking at things aesthetically and realize 3 days later that you forgot to put the date anywhere on your website. So just make sure if you're removing any of those, they're included by default for a reason. So you want to make sure that you have them included elsewhere on your website in a place that's easy to find. This is your first header image option. It's going to look very much like your header image on our old websites. It'll automatically darken your image a little bit here so that the text will show on top of it. That's something to keep in mind. If you have an image that you really want to be bright and clear and bold, this may kind of cut down on the boldness of your image because it has to make sure the wording is visible over it. And you can see over here on mobile, what it does is actually pull that text down into a block below because it'd be too small to show over the image clearly. The second option is going to be a stacked banner. And so what this is going to do is essentially exactly the same on mobile as the default was, but it'll do the same thing on your desktop. So it'll have this nice clear image here, and then it'll put the text, typically your race name, date, and location right below that image instead of on top of it. This one does not automatically put a dark overlay over your photo. You can add one, but it's going to show at a full color. This is a really nice option if you have just really, really good photography that you want to highlight and you want to make sure it's seen clearly. The last option for a header is going to be the full height. This is the newer one with V2. I think it looks really nice. It gives kind of a more professional look to some websites. It's going to pull the image all the way up to the top. It's also going to put the overlay of words here. So again, it's going to automatically darken the image a touch to make sure that these key details are readable. And it's worth noting that on mobile, it also does the stacking. So all three of these on mobile look the same. This choice is strictly about how it's going to look on a desktop. The other kind of header we have is a page header. And so this is going to be a header that goes on all of your other pages other than your home page. There are a couple of options here. So I think it's worth noting you can't turn these on only some pages. You either have the header on for all pages other than the home page, or you have it off. There's no kind of like pick and choose which ones it goes on. So this stacked header is going to be a large image up top. It's going to look kind of like the homepage header image with the race details down below. I think a lot of times it's larger than people want on individual pages, but it can look really nice. So it's worth playing with if you think you have, you want to make sure you have a lot of images up at the top. The other option for a page header is going to be this much narrower banner up here. It does not necessarily include the information right over it. You can include it over it, or you can hide that. My kind of word of warning on this one is because of the way it's mobile responsive, this image is going to actually show pretty differently on mobile than on a desktop. And so you want to be really careful to test out your images to see if you think they can look good in both sizes before you go with this. Worth noting, if you want to have a header and you don't like either of these options, there's actually, I would say, 3 other options. You can use just a plain, color. It'll use your theme color for your website and put your race information over it. You can disable a page header entirely and not use one. And if you disable your page header entirely, you can use just regular components like images on each page to build kind of a default version of a header for your pages anyways. You can just use it as a regular component instead of a full header. In terms of images that you're adding to your website, there's a couple of different ways to do that, and I think there are different situations in which you want to use each. So the most obvious one is adding an image as a component. This is going to let you add an image, and actually I did not update this text. It'll let you add an image in 1, 2, and now 3 or 4 columns. So you can pick, how, within that column you want to upload an image. There are kind of limited style options here. So when you look at your website, I think I have a slide with this later. You have settings that you can set for the style of your section. Your section is going to be that container. So this 2 columns here is 2 sections here. You can kind of update each of these separately. But the photo is actually the component, not the section. That light blue that you see behind it, that's the section. So you can't round the images on the photo here. You can only round the images on the section back here. Sometimes you want to check these, and I think this goes for everything. Make sure you're always checking how things look on mobile. With like 70% of people coming to your race websites are seeing them on mobile. And the exact sizing of these can vary a little bit on mobile, so make sure that you're happy with what shows on mobile as well as on your laptop. Newer component that I think is really great with images, you can also take those regular square photos you have now, and while you can't round the edges, you can make them a circle. And this is just automatically, it'll pull it into a circle. You can, change where it's looking, the horizontal and vertical alignment. You can zoom in and out, and then you can post them in different sizes, a small, medium, or large. And those really do look really nice and kind of give some dimension to your websites. The other option for images is to not actually use a component at all, and to actually just use the image as the background of your section. The way you do that is when you come in and you change, sorry, the problem with the GIF is it moves and I can't point to things. Instead of having a background color here, you have an image there. And what that does is put an image behind it. Now you can use a component on top of that. There's some cool websites that have text or other images right on top of a background image, but you can also just leave it as is and it'll just look like an image on the page. The benefit to that is that that then gives you some of the style options available for sections. So then you can round the corners on it. You can add a little border. It's going to give you a little bit more flexibility for the way that it shows up. The one caveat I would say is that you're going to want to enable section height if you use this. And you'll see that as an option on your settings, on your section settings, because it's mobile responsive and it's just a background in the way that it's read. So if you're on a like, I think I have a photo, yeah. If you are on a phone like this read as there's nothing in this section. So it just became like basically a line. If you enable section height, what that's going to do is say that you want a minimum amount of that to show. And so that will then pull the image back up. It'll tell them even on a phone, we want this to show at a regular height. We don't want you to collapse it, even though there's no, quote unquote content in it. So this is kind of a little bit of a breakdown. This is what it looks like without section height enabled, using it as a background image. This is what happens when you enable section height. And then the other option that you have is that you can vertically center the content, and that will kind of pull this together. I think that can look nice if your image is not the same size really as the text is next to. If you center your text there, then that'll create a little bit more of a cohesive look there. Another option for photos, you can add a slideshow. This is going to let you add up to 10 images in a row that'll kind of cycle through. One note of warning on this is that you want to make sure you size all the images the same. Make them all vertical, make them all horizontal. Make sure that you use. I think I typically will just go into Canva and use one file size to make sure that I have all of them the exact same size. And the reason for that is you can kind of see here when you have them in different sizes, it creates this awkward padding because it has to have a container that's big enough for the photos of all shapes. If you can get them to be the same, then it's going to drop that down to a reasonable amount of padding, and it'll prevent some kind of awkward empty space on your page. Note this component currently is the only image option that does not connect to Image Gallery. It's a little bit clunkier to upload photos, but that should be upgraded soon. The cards component, so cards are a really neat component. I think kind of give some visual difference to your websites. They will be in columns of 2, 3, or 4, and they're clickable. You'll kind of notice that they're live. Essentially, when you hover over them, you see them kind of bounce up a little bit, so they kind of pull off the page a little bit. It makes it clear that it is interactive content. They are mobile responsive, and that is both good and bad. We'll kind of show you what that looks like in a minute. But this is kind of, the setup that you're going to see is you're going to put in the image, you're going to put in your text, you're going to put in any URL here, and then it'll pop up to look like this over here. Just a couple of quick examples so you can see what these are kind of used for. We see them often, I see them sometimes for sponsors if people don't want to use the sponsor component and they want to kind of customize the way their sponsors look, or kind of quick, clear pieces of information. Sometimes I'll see them used for like events, here's your 5K, half marathon, marathon information, and it gives kind of a nice clean breakdown that way. Or also, there's this event up here to just use them for photos in kind of a different way. What makes cards kind of challenging and why sometimes we are hesitant to tell everyone to use them is because they are mobile responsive for all screens, they can look a little different on all screens. And what that means is that different parts of your image are going to show up. This is one where I really highly recommend using the Canva template, because what that's going to do is it's going to give you something that looks just like this. It's going to say you want an image that covers all of this area, but only this area in the bright pink square is going to show on every device. And so if you have words, if you have just a part of an image that looks awkward, if it's not included, you want to make sure that that part looks good on every device, on like that's the part that is really important, because that's going to show everywhere. And this literally is what I would do in Canva, is I would actually just leave that image back there, change the transparency so I can see it, make sure that I have everything where I want it, and then, go ahead and delete the markers there once I am confident that everything this wording here is within that box. Now I no longer need those markers, I can delete them, but it can be really useful to start with them there. And this is kind of an example that shows what we mean by these look different everywhere. These are all the same images, but if you have 2 cards in a row, it's going to give you this kind of almost square image here. If you have 3, it's going to be a pretty long card image up here. If you have 4, it's a little bit of an in-between. But also, if you notice, for any of the cards, they're going to look, they're going to look long on a mobile device. So even if you have designed it for this because you only have 2 on your desktop, you're going to have to also make sure they show well enough on a phone for this. Next up is our FAQ component, which is pretty new and pretty cool. Really easy to add. It's going to work just like any component. You can come in and just find your FAQs. That's going to come up with some suggested options. You can just click on them and then add your answer if you have one of those that you want to include in your FAQ. You can also add infinite number of custom questions. You don't have to use any of our preset ones if none of those apply to your race. If you don't have parking, you don't need to include that FAQ. They're just good suggestions to have. We've always really recommended that races have FAQs. Having this component makes it a little bit easier to get started there and to kind of figure out what you want to get into your FAQ. These are really important for, making sure, A, that people who come to your website, your runners, can find information about your race that they want to know, hopefully before they email you. And 2, that Google and AI have information about your race that's accurate, because people are also going to ask them for answers about your race, and you want to make sure that they can read accurate information and can answer for you. Just a quick look at what this looks like. So they're kind of accordion style, but people will just see the questions. They can click on them. It'll pop out to a full answer there. It looks pretty similar and clean on a phone as well. Another reason that you're going to want the FAQ component is that it is required for accessing a RunSignup AI chatbot, which was released officially in beta to all races yesterday. So any race, there is a blog up on that. We'll include that in our follow-up email. And then also there will be a webinar next week on 10/28 for anyone who wants to get started with a beta AI chatbot. But you have to be using Websites V2 and an FAQ component to have a RunSignup AI chatbot. And the reason for that is that we need to make sure that the chatbot has enough information about your race to be effectively trained and to answer questions well. You want to make sure, again, for AI, but also for any runners who are coming to your website, that your FAQ is as comprehensive as possible and that it is updated anytime there are changes. As noted, it's not just for AI. Your FAQ is also going to be something that people do use. A couple of recommendations that I would have for people is making sure that you keep your questions in a logical answer. People are going to scroll through, and if you have 40 FAQ questions because you want to have comprehensive information, it can be hard for people to find the one about, packet pickup on race day. So if you can quickly and easily just drag these around, you can change the order on them so you can get them into an order that makes more sense. If you have more than a few questions, and I think you probably should, you can also add headers. And to do that, what you would actually do is add a text component, put in a header, add an FAQ component, add all the FAQ questions for that kind of question. Like here we have registration questions. Then I added another text component for a header for packet pickup and another FAQ component here. So this is actually 3 text components and 3 FAQ components. It will still get read by the chatbot this way, but it does mean if I am a person looking at it, that I can more quickly find where the answer may be. My cat is having a rough day. More style options. This is just a quick recap. I think this was covered last week, but just to kind of a reminder here, these are the settings that come up for any section on your website. you can round corners, you can add borders, you can increase the padding if you want a little more spacing in there. The restricted width is going to give you like a little bit of white on the sides of your website. And if you have this unrestricted width, then you have these options. You do not have an option for border and rounding corners if you have full width. Because if you have full width, it's going to expand the entire width of the site, of your screen, and so there wouldn't be any room for rounding corners or borders. Background, this is where you would add an image if you want to use just the image as a background, or you can use a color, or this one is no color. One other note here is section title, or it might say text, depending on what your component is in the section. The text color can be either black and white or themed. Themed is going to pull off of the colors that you have set for your website. That will only be an option if you have no background color here. If you have a background color, it's going to be disabled, because in that case, our system is automatically reading whether white or black shows better on that background. And most of that is, just to make sure people don't accidentally make a mistake and put orange on red, and it can't actually be red. So new options, I kind of briefly alluded to this. We've previously just had 1 and 2 column options. We have a 3 and 4 column option now, which is really cool. And I think I'll show you some examples that kind of display how nice this is, just having the ability to provide some more variety here. You can see with columns, if you are on mobile, it's going to kind of drop them down into a row because you don't have room for them. But you have the option to add a bunch of different versions there. Second new style option that I think is useful is there's 2 kind of groups that have come out recently. So one is an image group that's going to be of up to 6 images. It's going to put images kind of in a row like that. That's 4, but you can do up to 6. You can see on mobile, that's going to stack then in groups of 2. You can use those, again, in different sizes, small, medium, or large. I think these were large, if I'm remembering correctly, which means they take up most of that column area. One note, these were all uploaded and then made to be circle images, so that's sort of automatic. But if you are using images that are square or rectangle, I would recommend you use images that are already the same size, because otherwise it'll just look a little bit awkward. They will be able to see the different sizes there. The other kind of group is a button group here, and that lets you put up to 3 buttons in a row. Kind of mimics a look that a lot of websites had using our old cover pages. Gives you a little bit more flexibility if you want to have kind of equally important calls to action all against the same line there. Font styles is going to let you customize the fonts on your website within some bounds. You can access this from your customized to your theme section on your website builder, and it's going to pop up basically a bunch of different combinations here with a heading font and a text font. Heading fonts can have a little more variety because it's usually not read as much, but there's some kind of variation within each of them. And this is kind of small, so it might be a little bit hard to see, but you can tell here, if you look at the event tiles, that gives you an idea. This is all exactly the same website, just with different font sizes, different font selections made. So it kind of gives you some flexibility to add a little bit of personality to your event based on the fonts that you choose. This is not super new, and it's not very fancy, but I think it's actually really nice. Using the divider component just gives you a little bit of ability to create some differentiation on your website without always having every block be colored. You can do them at different thicknesses. There's a pretty wide range here, and in any of your theme colors. So I use these a lot. I kind of think if you're struggling with trying to make things nice, it's a nice one to play around with and see what that'll do for your website. A few more new components, favorite components. Adding a PDF. This is, I think, pretty brand new. I will add the caveat that in general, having actual information on your website instead of in a PDF is better, because your website can be read again by Google and by AI, and it's more easily accessible. That said, there are certain situations where you have a PDF that you really want to be able to share. We do still have races that do really thorough athlete guides. It is easier for them to do in a PDF form. They want to make it sure it's really printable for athletes, that kind of thing. There can be options. If you want a PDF, what this does is allow you to upload a PDF, and then you'll have a quick and easy option here for people to link to it. You can also use that then to give you a URL to use if you need to link to a PDF from your email. Social links. So this component has existed. It's the ability to take any of your social media links and just add them quickly to your website in a nice little component. But there are some new social options that are included in that. You actually update these, you add the component for social links. You'll see this link here. And what that's going to do is take you to the social media links page, which I think is linked in your dashboard from promotion. And this is where you would add any of the handles you have for various social media channels. If you leave them blank, then that icon will not show up in your social links. But if you have for any of these that you have, you want to add your handle, and that will allow you to link to them. I think the newest ones on here were Blue Sky and Strava. So that is a quick option to keep people engaged with you off your website. Contact us. These forms, contact us forms were included in, I think, the first iteration of websites v2. The new update here that is, I think, really useful is that you can actually add a different contact email here. You've always been able to add different, descriptions and text there, but this means previously any contact form just was forwarded straight to the race director listed on the race. Now you can update that in each contact form. So if I have a volunteer page, I can put my volunteer coordinator's email there and have a contact form that is specifically for volunteers. And then I can have a separate one that is specifically for sponsor information that goes to my sponsor coordinator, and one with runner questions that comes to me. And that gives you a little bit more flexibility in terms of, emails going to the right place and not having to forward things around. Leaderboards. I love leaderboards. They make your races really interactive and engaging. Fundraisers is, if you do any fundraising, you should 100% have a fundraiser leaderboard, because that lets people see how they're doing and gives some motivation for other people to try to keep up, try to get themselves on the leaderboard. Charity leaderboard is a little bit more niche, but we do have races that work with 5, 10, 20 different charities. And this lets you actually see a view of which charities are raising the most, in addition to which fundraisers are raising the most. This one is probably the one that is applicable to the most. I think it was the most recently released as well. It's a top teams leaderboard, so this is just pulling off how many members are on each team. If you do any sort of team, social teams, I think it's a great component to have. Like a lot of races don't have any incentives for team size. It's literally just, you can create a team, and this provides sort of a free incentive because people like to know that they're first. They like to know that they're where they rank, and you can have this on your website to kind of acknowledge and recognize those teams that are really working hard to grow. Strava, I know this was covered last week, but I can't not mention it because I think it is a really cool component that we see people putting in, and it creates just kind of a nice interactive experience for runners who want to come and take a look at your course. And then obviously it's easy for them to link straight to it on Strava for their own use. Playlist is one that I added kind of late because I think my impression was that this was sort of useless, because what do you need a playlist on your website for? People can get playlists anywhere. And I think what changed my mind a bit about this was at a conversation a few months ago with the Harpoon 5-miler about their playlists. And what I think was really interesting is they had just kind of put up a playlist that they had created for the race. It was not something they promoted super strongly, but they were, sort of sharing that they had made this playlist. Unprompted, they then found that more than a dozen people had actually created their own playlists and shared them on Spotify, like specific Harpoon 5-miler playlists, including things that were very specific, like 8-minute pace. And so I do think that, it's an opportunity to do something kind of interactive with your runners, have a contest to see who can come up with the coolest playlist. Starting with your own playlist gives you an opportunity to kind of talk about people's music on the course and, how they are using that for their, either for their training or for their racing. Event lists. If you have multiple events, I think these are really useful for linking people to all of the events in your roster. It is still a little bit manual, although I think they're going to be getting a little bit better. But I think the important note here is just that your events have to be public to show on your calendar. If you have an event that is marked as private, that is not, generally findable, it also will not show on your calendar. And that's because if you marked it as not findable, you don't want it to show on someone else's calendar, so it does not show on any calendars. Just really quickly, I was going to go through a couple of examples to see some of these things in a little more action than my screenshots. This one is actually just a test race that Allison created because she's been using it for a lot of the new components, but I think it's because she's been using it for a lot of things that just came out. It has some great examples of things that just came out. You can kind of see how the text style here is very different from what we have typically seen. There's the button group here. She does a good job, I think, of using emojis in hers too. I'm very bad at that, but I think that's a nice use of emojis in a website. And then you can see kind of the 3-column here using the circular images. Sort of almost mimics a card look here. They aren't clickable, they don't kind of pop out the same way. But using the image and text does actually give it a little bit of a similar look there to cards. And then down here, the 4-column and a quick FAQ component here is used to give a little bit more information about each event. Why Turkey Trot? This one is great. And this is stuff that just came out, so I'm impressed that they have this all up. This here use of a 4-column I think is really nice. And I think one thing that I haven't seen a lot before this is these images with transparent backgrounds put onto colors. So they really kind of pop off the page there. I think that's a really nice use of color. Similar here, all of this kind of using transparent backgrounds to make these images pop out a little bit more. And then this down here is an image group. So that's showing you what that would look like to have the kind of 6 images across. Again, they're using transparent images there so that they kind of blend into the background. This one here I was going to show because they do have the chatbot on it, so you can see it's always down here and it pops up. This image that's on it, that's customizable, so you could have one that's different if you think there's another image that's going to make people click a little bit more. This will come up and let me ask a question. See if that gets an answer, because I did not ask that very clearly. Yeah, and it did. I wanted the race date, and even though my question wasn't great, it did give me the race date here. So that pops up in the corner there. It also comes with a component. So yeah, they have theirs on their homepage down here as a component. I think I would often recommend that you actually have a separate page for it as well, or instead, because that way it's a specific link you can send to people in emails to say, hey, if you have a question, ask the chatbot. But it is in both places. It'll be both this little pop-up and also a component. San Antonio Marathon. This is one of the races I've seen that has these kind of almost transparent backdrop with the borders, and I think it actually looks really nice and clean. This is, I think, a good example of a very simple website that has, kind of picked a few elements and stuck with them throughout. There's a lot of consistency there. This one may have been shared before because I think they do a lot of things really well. One thing I wanted to call out here is this very subtle background image here. That is what they're using. They're using a background image with a tiny bit of design that matches their regular background, the color of their regular background. And it just gives a little bit of pop and dimension to the website. The caveat here is that this is text on that image. So if you do this, you'll want to make sure that's in a situation where you'd want to include all of that in alt text. And the nice use of a lot of images there. Just a nice clean website. I think there's the other thing I'll call out here, just, the ability to build out different pages. You don't have to focus only on your home page. You can use components, all of the components on all of your pages, which gives you a lot of flexibility. Houston Turkey Trot. This one really, really, really leans into, I think, FOMO and getting the most out of their images. Very, very bold images. This is a great use of a background image here with the countdown and the date information on top of it. So it's a really simple component, but it looks really nice. It kind of combines information and a nice callback to race day. I think using images as much as possible reminds people why they might want to come to your race, tells them it's going to be fun. And the last one is another one that's kind of simple. It's actually, I think using the styles and colors, this kind of looks a little bit more different than some of our websites. And I think that's really what the power of Websites V2 is it doesn't necessarily have to look like every other RunSignup website out there. It can look like your own unique website. And that is it for me. Next webinar, we have not sent this out yet. We just got it up today, but we will include it. Next web on 10/28, we will have a webinar for anyone who wants to get started with the RunSignup AI chatbot while it's in beta. Any questions?
Yeah, we have one good question that I think would be useful for everybody. If someone makes an update to their FAQ section, will that reflect in the chat bot?
Yes. The chatbot should be reading the FAQ repeatedly. Daniel may be able to give a better timeline of how often it refreshes next week. The other thing that you'll be able to do is actually train the chatbot. So you'll have a back-end dashboard as well. And if you don't like an answer or you think it's reading old information, you can actually train it directly as well.
Perfect. I think that was the, oh, we just had one more come in. Is there a way to add something temporarily to the banner to encourage registration before a deadline, like a shirt deadline? That's dynamic.
Dynamic, no. You would have to basically just upload a new banner and you'd have to upload a new banner for that time range. That is a cool idea. I don't know how feasible it would be, but that's a cool idea.
Yes, some more flowing in here. So is there a way to, oh, this one I just asked. Are these updates going to be the same on membership websites?
Yes, with the exception of components that are, like tied to race data, would only be on races, or, membership data would only be on memberships. But in general, one of the reasons that we've been switching everything over to Websites V2 is that it gives us the ability to, when we release the FAQ component, release it across products.
Perfect. And then, not really a question, but a good reminder. Someone said they upgraded their website to V2 and they didn't realize that all of the information from the previous race had pulled over. So packet pickup information wasn't updated to the current year. So it's just a good reminder to go back and check all of those emails and everything else to make sure it's up to date with the current event. Because I think, Johanna, you did mention you can't copy and paste into it when you upgrade it from the old website to website V2.
Yes.
Just make sure that all that information is correct.
Yeah, I have sent many an email confirmation that did not get updated from year to year. So every time you make any updates, making sure you go back through everything is a good idea.
Yes. Another question is, I think you mentioned using cards for sponsor recognitions. Do you have any examples of those?
Oh,
I don't know any on the top of my head.
Off the top of my head, not on RunSignup, but I do know I have a blog I did on tickets, which would be the same idea. That's not the word.
And while you look for that, I'll just read some more questions. If I change the name of my race, will I lose my past info? I don't believe you would lose your past information. You just want to make sure you update everything to reflect the new name.
Yeah. In fact, like updating the name will not erase the rest of the information.
And
here's a couple of examples of cards for sponsors.
So we can make sure we can include that link as well in the follow-up email. Someone asked if we can share the list of websites with them. Yes, we'll have all of the examples that Johanna shared in their PowerPoint that will be emailed out to everyone tomorrow. Can a PDF be stored in an FAQ? I don't believe that's a capability right now.
Yeah, and I don't think you can link currently. So you could
I don't think you
paste
can
in the
link.
link, but it'd be pretty hacky. I would, that might be the best way to do it for now. But the other thing is if you're doing that, that PDF isn't going to get read. So the FAQ would be sort of useful, but less so. I think I would probably point to a page that hosts the PDF with a kind of an overview of what the, quick snippet overview of what's in the PDF.
Okay. Can an Instagram feed be embedded?
No. So it's been a while and I don't remember the details. There was a time when we could do that, and the functionality for that through the API has changed, so that does not work anymore.
Okay. Since membership sites are going to work this way too, will we be able to create QR codes for those like we can for races?
Like QR codes.
Check in when you check in with the QR code.
So I'm not sure if I know the question. So can you create QR codes that go to like specific pages? Yes, that will work. QR codes for check-in will will work depending on what your exact use is. You can use a QR code. You can use your member QR code to sign in to a race that you have registered for under that same account. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's actually the question that's being asked, but.
Okay. And then one final question. When you were talking about the gallery, or the slideshow, presenting the 10-picture component, there was a gallery comment. Can you just go back to that and just highlight it one more time, I think, is what this
There was a what comment?
When you were talking about the slideshow, when the 10 pictures that you can put in the slideshow.
Oh, image gallery.
Gallery, yes, sorry.
Yeah. I heard that. Yeah, so basically for most images here, if I'm adding an image, I come into this image gallery and I can upload an image, or I can pick an image that I've uploaded before. For slideshow, it currently does not link to your image gallery. So you have to upload the image fresh, and you'll see like this one already has 4 images in here, but it'll look the same each time. You have to click, choose file. It'll let you upload one at a time. And then, you go back and click and choose it again. Over time, image gallery will be integrated into slideshow, so it'll work the same way, but it's just worth knowing right now that like you can't access the previous images you've uploaded for a slideshow today.
Awesome. And then any other questions that come in the next couple of seconds here, we will make sure we get them an answer emailed over to you in the next day or so. That is it.
Well, thank you guys. And we will also get an FAQ up sometime next week with all the webinar or website questions.